Hello everyone and welcome to SplitSecond, Innistrad Crimson Vow Edition Round 2. Last week we had a blast, and this week we decided to stretch the roster a little bit. This week Baal brewed a winconless Jacob Hauken Inspector, a deck focused on grinding and controlling the match until he can put together a dramatic scepter win through his commander and finish the game in a myriad of ways. Leite is piloting Eruth Impulsive Storm from Lfccruz, a deck focused on storming off with plenty of low-costed draw spells that access increasingly amounts of cards, and eventually win through Brain Freeze lines or either Flux Reservoir. David once again brought his Umbris deck built around the Hullbreaker Horror to generate infinite mana and cast and recast Umbris to exile his opponent's decks. And Hélder is on Torens Feast of the Angels combo deck, centered around Torens Curio to generate infinite soldiers and kill the table with access to Concordant Crossroads or other outlets. Baal is going first and he mulliganed down to 6, finding a single snow-covered island, with hopes of hitting a land from the top to cast his Mox Diamond for ramp. Mystic Remora turn 1 will be key. Dress Down is a great card to prevent several creature-based combos, Dramatic Reversal needs Isochron and some rocks, Archmage Emeritus helps if he puts himself in a control position and is sent to the bottom Cyclonic Rift. Leite also mulliganed down to 6, not wanting to go lower, keeping a 1-lander as well with a mana confluence. However, he has Brainstorm and Burning Inquiry to dig deep into his library, and the latter can also disrupt his opponent's mulligan plans. Chain of Vapor to remove some stack space, Sunsong for interaction, and Birgi is great for his storming turns. He sent to the bottom Torens Curio. David mulliganed once and found a ramped up end with a Bloodstained Mire, Underground River and Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth for lands, Lotus Petal, Fellwar Stone and Dark Ritual for ramp. And will we see our first Tasha's Hideous Laughter in the channel? How devastating can this be? Finally, Hélder mulliganed once and found a decent hand with a Savannah and Wooded Bastion for lands. Drenith Magistrate can be key at stopping most of his opponent's plans, especially late. Hushing Grief is a great stacks piece in the current meta, Circle of Dreams Druid for mana, and he already found Torens Curio for his combo, and if he gets countered he also has Argivian Find to retrieve it and try it again. Ready for this match? The game starts with Baal asking for a land from the top, and he finds it. This way he casts his Mox Diamond, discarding a snow-covered island. He then plays a Misty Rainforest and cracks it for an island, so he shuffles the bottom card from the mulligan. He then casts a Mystic Remora and passes the turn. Leite draws and sees no land, so he plays a Mana Confluence and casts a Burning Inquiry, triggering Remora and being unable to pay. Everyone draws 3 and discards 3 at random. This might have been the most devastating inquiry ever, as Leite found no lands and lost his second option to dig for them in Brainstorm. David lost Foe and Tasha's Hideous Laughter will have to wait for another game. Hélder lost Curio and he saved Evolve to retrieve it to hand, and Baal lost Dramatic Reversal to combo and Dress Down as interaction. David plays a Bloodstained Mire and passes the turn, not wanting to feed the fish. Hélder is still recovering from the inquiry blow, plays the Savannah and passes. Baal doesn't think twice about paying for Remora. He plays a Prismatic Vista and cracks it for an island to cast his commander Jacob Hauken Inspector, passing afterwards. Leite is still stuck without lands, so he casts a Careful Study, triggering Remora and he can't pay. The next 2 cards are still not lands, and he feels desperately out of the game as he passes. In his end step, David cracks this fetch for a Watery Grave and goes to his turn. He plays an Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth and casts a Fellwar Stone, assuming that Baal will most likely keep paying for his fish, and he also needs to set up. Hélder draws a good card. He plays a Prismatic Vista and cracks it for a Forest, and casts the drawn card, Drenith Magistrate, before passing the turn. Baal still pays for the Remora, hoping to dig into better options, especially after Drenith came out. He activates his Jacob to draw a card and then exiles 1 card from his hand face down. He then plays a Swampy Polluted Delta and casts a Mana Vault. He follows it with the Sapphire Medallion and passes the turn. Leite draws the 8th card this game and still no lands, so he's forced to pass. Quite the unlucky streak there. David plays a Marsh Flats and casts a Dimir Signet, triggering Remora but unable to pay. Is he holding another Pact of Negation? Hélder plays an Ancient Tomb and ponders for a second. He casts a Skull Clamp, triggering Remora, and he can't pay. With the rest of his mana, he casts Torens Feast of the Angels. In his end step, Baal fires a Winds of Rebuke on Hélder's Skull Clamp. And as Leite thinks the top 2 cards would be lands, they are not. 10 cards and no lands so far. Baal finally lets the fish go, and takes 1 ping from the vault. He plays his Scalding Tarn and then casts a Chromox, imprinting Archmage Emeritus, as he plans to end the game soon rather than grind. He casts a Sensei's Divine in top, and then casts a Time Spiral with a single card in hand. David responds with a Dark Ritual, as he is about to lose it and could find an Ad Nauseam in the next 7. Time Spiral resolves and everyone gets a new 7. Baal untaps his 4 lands and then tries to move steps, so David spends or loses his triple black mana. David has nothing to use it on, so Baal gets to his second main phase and casts a Sol Ring, and then cracks his Polluted Delta for an island. He follows it with a Thieving Skydiver kicked for 2. When it enters, he steals David's Dimmer Signet in order to get more mana for his next turn. David does not tap it to keep his land untapped. In his end step, Leite casts a Brainstorm to get the most out of his low mana and shape a card with his fetch. In his turn, he plays a Wooded Foothills and cracks it for a Volcanic Island. He then casts a Free Gitaxian Probe, targeting Baal to see what he's up against, draws and then casts a Springleaf Drum before passing the turn. David plays a Command Tower and then cracks his Marsh Flats for an Underground Sea. He follows it with an Imperial Seal, and Baal responds by adding Dimir mana with his Signet to activate Sensei's Divining Top and check his options. He then uses the blue mana to respond with his Swan Song. David then casts Tasha's Hideous Laughter, which found its way back again. However, Baal responds with a Spell Pierce, postponing its resolution for later. Hélder gets to his turn, casts his Sensei's Divining Top and activates it. He plays a Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth, which, in addition to Urborg, every land is a bio in addition to its other text. He then attacks Leite for 3 and passes the turn. Baal takes 1 ping from the vault and starts counting some mana. He casts Tezzeret the Seeker. It resolves and he upticks it, untapping Sol Ring and Mana Vault. He then plays an island and casts a Nexus of Fate, which resolves and it's shuffled back into his deck. He then activates the top to look at his top 3, and then activates Jacob to draw a card and exile 1 from his hand. He attacks Leite with his Skydiver, as one of his options is to ultimate Tezzeret in the next turn and kill Hélder, but he is not keen on removing Drenith just yet. This way, he cracks the Scalding Tarn to find a Mystic Sanctuary, and with its trigger targeting Swan Song on the stack, he activates the top to see the top 3 cards and rearrange them before putting the Swan Song on top, and going to his extra turn. He draws the Swan Song and then casts Dress Down, which allows him to draw Muddle the Mixture, which he transmutes to find Dramatic Reversal to his hand. He then activates Tezzeret to search for an Isochron Scepter to the battlefield, entering and imprinting Dramatic Reversal. He now demonstrates a loop where he can generate infinite mana by tapping his rocks and activating Isochron Scepter to create a copy of Dramatic Reversal, untapping the rocks and the scepter. He also demonstrates a loop where he draws the whole library by tapping Sensei's Divining Top to draw a card, and holds priority to activate the scepter to untap everything, and activates the top once again, always holding priority, and always tapping it for extra draws, because putting the top on top is part of its resolution. He does this for the exact number of cards in his library. He now casts a Copy Artifact, entering as a copy of Isochron Scepter and imprinting Swan Song, in order to generate infinite bird tokens. He casts an instant sorcery or enchantment, and then activates Isochron Scepter 2 to create a copy of Swan Song, targeting it. Holding priority, he activates Isochron Scepter 1 to create a copy of Dramatic Reversal, untapping all permanents. Still holding priority, he activates Scepter 2 to create another copy of Swan Song, targeting the first Swan Song and getting a bird. Rinse and repeat for a bajillion of Swan tokens. He casts Nexus of Fate for an extra turn, which is shuffled back into his empty library, and he can kill everyone with infinite birds and turns. GG. Because this was quite a quick match, we decided to do another one. This time, Hélder won the dice roll and he is starting. He kept his first 7 with a Marsh Flats and a City of Brass for lands. Carpet of Flowers is great in this spot, Birds of Paradise for extra ramp and Collector Oof can also be key in this spot, where most of the winning lines require artifacts. Skullclamp can net him some good card draw from his commander tokens, depending on the timing of Oof, and Altar of the Brood is an outlet for the Curio line. Baal once again mulliganed down to 6, finding a Prismatic Vista and Flooded Strand for lands. Phantasmal Image is mostly to copy Docksides or other key creatures. Mana Drain for interaction, Isochron Scepter lacks Dramatic Reversal, but he has Mystical Tutor to try to find it, lacking only some mana rocks. He sent to the bottom Pact of Negation. Late mulliganed once and was glad to keep his turn 1 wheels. Blessed Zone, Mana Confluence, Cephalid Coliseum for lands with a Lotus Petal, Arcane Signet and Rite of Flame for ramp, can allow him to cast Wheel of Fortune turn 1 or wait to cast Signet and cast it turn 2 in case he wants to save some ramp. David kept his first 7 and quite a good one, filled with a bit of everything but sadly lacking on ramp. Marsh Flats and Underground Sea for lands. Wishclaw Talisman can be used to find an Entomb for Oathbreaker in order to animate Dead him. Swan Song and Winds of Rebuke for interaction and Dothy Voidwalker can net him some good cards to crack it later on. Ready for round 2? Hélder starts his turn with a City of Brass and casts his Birds of Paradise, passing the turn. Baal plays a Prismatic Vista and cracks it for a snow-covered island, also passing. Leite plays a Mana Confluence, casts a Lotus Petal and cracks it for a Rite of Flame to cast a Wheel of Fortune turn 1. Everyone passes and Baal responds with a Mystical Tutor for a Fierce Guardianship. David didn't even get to play his turn and is getting a new 7. Leite still casts a Jeweled Lotus and passes. David plays a Polluted Delta and cracks it for an untapped Watery Grave, paying 2. He casts a Sol Ring and passes. Maybe this mulligan was not so bad. Hélder plays an Arid Mesa and cracks it for his Savannah. With less options, he now casts his commander, Torens, Feast of the Angels, before passing. Baal plays an Ancient Tomb and also casts his commander, Jacob Hauken, Inspector. He still casts a Mana Crypt and follows it with a Mox Ember. He even adds a Failure Stone to the mix, before passing. This will give him quite a quarry. Leite plays an Ancient Tomb as well, and then casts his commander, Eruth, Tormented Prophet. He still casts a Sensei's Divine in top and activates it before passing. David plays a Scalding Tarn and cracks it for an island. He then casts a Dark Ritual in order to cast his commander, Umbris Fury Manifest. Leite promptly mentions he has a land in the top 3, so after some consideration on who else would have less lands in the deck, he chooses Baal, which sadly hits a Misty Rainforest right away. David still has a tutor, but Baal's Fierce Guardianship deters him to go for it, and he passes. The Misty Rainforest will soon be placed in the exile pile. Hélder plays a Plains and then casts a Finnorn Elves, triggering Torrents for a Soldier token. He then casts a Lotus Petal and follows it with a Toski Bearer of Secrets, triggering Torrents for another Soldier. He then goes into combat and attacks David as he is running ad naus. Although, after some countering from David, he actually blocks and trades his Umbris for Torrents, in hopes to recast them again for more exiling. Hélder sadly doesn't get a draw from Toski and passes, still happy to have removed David's access to his commander. Baal is safe from his Mana Crypt. He plays an island and passes fully untapped. Leite plays a Training Center and then casts a Jessica's Will, targeting David, who has 5 cards in hand. Baal responds with his Fierce Guardianship, but Leite also brings out a more Fierce Guardianship. In response, Baal casts a Blue Sun Zenith X = 4, targeting himself. It resolves and the Zenith is shuffled. Baal still activates Jacob in response but finds no answer, so Jessica's Will resolves. Leite casts the Mox Opal and then solves the equation as well, tutoring for a Goblin Lore, that he also casts. Due to his commander, he exiles the top 8 cards and then discards 3 at random, becoming Hellbent. Still quite a good deal. However, he didn't hit any fast mana, so he uses the last red to activate the top but finds no fuel in the top 3, passing the turn instead. David gets to his turn, casts a Jeweled Lotus, and after all the interaction gone from Baal, he casts his Demonic Tutor for a Mox Opal, which he casts right away, setting up ways to get infinite mana once he gets his Hullbreaker. He then casts Imperial Seal and searches for a Reanimate to the top, as he holds an unmarked grave to win next turn. Hélder untaps and goes right into combat, attacking David for 4. Toski triggers 4 times and he responds to it with a Congregation at Dawn, searching for a Moonblessed Cleric, Esper Sentinel and Circle of Dreams Druid, putting them on top and drawing them. He then plays a Windswept Heath and casts the Esper Sentinel before passing. Baal now loses the crit roll. He casts a Lotus Petal, triggering Esper Sentinel but not paying. He then casts a Narset, Parter of Veils and activates her right away, hoping to find a will. Instead, he reveals a Force of Negation. He then activates Jacob, drawing and exiling a card, still not finding a will, so he passes. Leite exiles the top 2 cards and quite a good ones. He casts the Dockside, entering and netting him 8 treasures. He then activates the top, but still unable to find fuel, he just casts the Red Elemental Blast on Baal's Jacob, triggering Esper Sentinel and paying for it before passing. In David's turn, he could try to go off, but the Force of Negation makes him wait another turn cycle. In his end step, Hélder cracks his Windswept Heath for a Temple Garden, paying 2 life to come untapped and casts a Worldly Tutor. However, Baal responds with a Flusterstorm, as he wouldn't be able to counter any incoming creature. Esper Sentinel triggers and he doesn't pay. Hélder then gets to his turn and goes straight into combat, attacking Narset for lethal and Finnorn Elves, and Esper Sentinel goes straight at Baal. Toski triggers and Hélder draws 2. He then recasts Torrens Feast of the Angels to attempt to win next turn, if he finds Cloudstone Curio. In his end step, Baal casts an Archmage Charm, targeting him to draw 2 cards, triggering and paying for Esper Sentinel. Baal then gets to his turn and wins the crit roll. He plays an island and recasts his Jacob. He follows it with a Lightning Greaves, triggering the Sentinel and paying for it. He then attempts to equip the Greaves to Jacob and Leite responds by activating the top to draw a card and put it on top, exiling the top 2 cards instead. He wants to cast the Bolt on Jacob, but after some discussion he is dissuaded to target Torrens instead, as Hélder is missing increasingly less pieces to combo off. Sentinel triggers and Leite doesn't pay. Baal then activates Jacob and passes the turn. Leite exiles the top 2 cards and casts Sensei's Divine in top, triggering and paying for Esper Sentinel, and plays the Scalding Tarn as well. He then activates the top to look at the top 3, and disliking them, he cracks the Tarn to find an island, and activates the tops to rearrange the 3 again. He then activates the top to draw a card, and exiles the top 2 instead. He then casts a Windrider Wizard, and follows it with a Fateless Looting, triggering the Windrider, which is replaced by Eruth, to exile the top 2 cards instead. Fateless Looting then resolves, exiling the top 4 cards. He follows that with a Burning Inquiry, triggering Windrider, and the table discusses the options of Baal casting the Force of Negation now, as it would mean the Vid could probably straight up win next turn, so it ends up resolving, as it can disrupt the Vid's hand as well. The Inquiry once again disrupts everyone's plans but Leite's, who is still hellbent simply generating value. He then casts a Gitaxian Probe just to draw a card, triggering Windrider, exiling 2 and then 2 more from its draw. He then casts Lion's Eye Diamond and follows it with Brainstorm, actually missing Windrider's trigger. He exiles 6 and then cracks the LED for triple red to cast Birgi and then follows it with the Mox Ember, triggering Birgi. He then casts Breakthrough, so excited on the storm count that he misses Windrider again. Leite's card management at the table is getting worse by the second. He finds plenty of fast mana that he casts. Mana Crypt first, triggering Birgi, Mana Vault, triggering Birgi again, and after some thinking he casts Aetherflux Reservoir and hopes to finish the game in that fashion, as he's slowly losing all his bullets. In response, however, the Vid casts a Force of Will, pitching a miscast, triggering Esper Sentinel and not paying. In response, Leite casts Flusterstorm that he had already exiled, triggering Windrider and Birgi, but in response, Baal fires a Trick Bind on the Storm trigger, which allows the Vid to simply pay 1 to save the foe. Esper Sentinel triggers and he doesn't pay. However, Leite still has access to Pyroblast, which he casts on the foe, triggering Windrider and Birgi. But the Burning Inquiry also gave the Vid some bullets, as he fires his Mental Misstep, effectively countering Leite's Reservoir. Leite exiles 4 more from the Windrider triggers. Isochron is revealed, and finally there is a line. He casts Dramatic Reversal to untap all his rocks, and get it to his graveyard, triggering Windrider and Birgi. He then casts Call to Mind to return Dramatic Reversal from his graveyard to his hand. He is now able to cast Isochron Scepter from exile and imprint Dramatic Reversal, in order to generate infinite mana, and through all these casts, Windrider will exile all his deck to be able to play it this turn due to Eruth. He then casts Underworld Breach to be able to escape Aetherflux Reservoir, and with another spell, he is able to gain enough life to kill the table with Reservoir. GG. Thank you for joining us for today's match, everyone. The first game showed Jacob's grinding potential by having access to 2 cards per turn and plenty of interaction. In the second game, however, Leite was able to disrupt most of his opponent's plans with the turn 1 wheel, which is one of his favorite plays. The Vid being last in turn order didn't help much, as he was 2 steps behind most of the time, as 2 blue players were playing first. We'd like to start the credits by thanking our current patrons, and especially Izanagi, TJ Rapp, Mike Burr, Jimu, Drunken Hellscat, V, RJ, Heated Chill, Pina, Ricardo, Dragonstake, Katerina, Michael Bowen, and Super Scaldi, the playmat guy from the comments, our most recent stack breaker. If you want to support us, you can do so by liking this video, subscribing, or by becoming a patron yourself. If you want to go through other Commander adventures, click one of the videos on the right. If you want to talk with us about our games or other EDH related matters, join us on Discord. Join us again next week for a new set of Commanders and more decisive plays. See you all then.